I embrace that. I enjoy the change. I don't fear it costs. About that excites me is that the idea be able to bring some change, not shoot overly radical change, but changes that. I think the atmosphere over Windsor was heavy as whispers began to spread through the palace. What started as quiet concern soon turned into a wave of heartbreak that reached every corner of the royal estate for Prince William. This was not just another royal announcement. It was deeply personal, cutting into memories he had fought hard to protect. He looked completely lost for words. One insider said tonight the palace is finally broken its silence, and the truth behind the sorrow is out, a truth that will change everything for the future king and his family. The palace breaks its silence. The message came late when most of London had already turned off its lights. At exactly 11 p.m. a statement appeared on the palace's official page, short but heavy with emotion. Those who read it felt a pull in their hearts, sensing something deeper beneath the lines. The announcement spread like fire across phones, through newsrooms, and into living rooms. Reporters began gathering near Kensington, trying to piece together the reason behind the sudden release. "It feels different this time," said one journalist, rubbing his eyes as camera lenses focused. The past months had already worn William down. Behind his composed smile, those close to him knew he had been struggling between his father's frail health and his position as heir to the throne. The pressure grew heavier. The public saw him at events, greeting crowds and shaking hands. Yet his eyes told another story. Each passing day seemed to add more weight to his shoulders. "He looks like a man trying to hold everything together," said a royal, glancing across the corridor as William walked past. Without a word, the palace's statement finally confirmed what many had feared. It spoke of a private family matter that had caused deep sorrow for the Prince of Wales. Details were carefully guarded. The tone left no doubt it was personal and painful. There was mention of reflection, of the family needing space, and of gratitude for the nation's kindness. "It's something no one was ready for," whispered a senior staff member who had seen the document before its release. The world now knew the silence had not been avoidance, it had been grief. Beyond the gates, people began to gather as word spread. Flowers were placed on the railings, candles lit along the walkways across the country. Television anchors paused before reading the official lines, their voices low and careful. Online messages of sympathy filled every corner. "Stay strong, William," one woman wrote. Her post shared thousands of times. Crowds in Windsor stood together, some crying openly, others just staring into the night. In that shared silence, a deep respect lingered. Many recalled how loss had shattered his life from an early age. William had often spoken about his mother with tenderness, calling her his guide through difficult moments. Now, as people revisited old photos of Diana holding his hand, the resemblance in his grief became unmistakable. "He carries her strength," said an elderly man who had followed the family for decades. At home, Catherine stood beside him, offering support. "She's been his anchor, a family friend," said the only one who can bring him back when he drifts too far into his thoughts. The statement's closing words were simple, a request for understanding and privacy. However, those words hinted at something larger, a shift in royal life. For years, William had been seen as the steady bridge between the monarchy's old ways and its future. Now the thought of him stepping back, even briefly, felt like a pause in the nation's heartbeat. "You'll come through it," said one palace worker, setting down her phone after reading the message. "He always does, but this time feels different. Outside, the London air grew cold, wrapping the palace in mist. Reporters stated at their posts, their breath rising like smoke in the light inside. Behind those stone walls, the heir to the throne sat with his head bowed, trying to gather himself. Every sound seemed pressed heavier. He just said, "I need a moment." A close friend later shared, recalling how William had walked out to the terraces and stood there for over an hour. The moonlight fell across the courtyard, and in that stillness the future king looked like a man trying to find his balance between duty and pain. By dawn, the palace curtains stayed drawn. Royal aides moved quietly, arranging calls and messages of condolence. The phones didn't stop ringing, yet somewhere in the middle of it all, William took a walk through the gardens before sunrise. He didn't say anything, said the guard who saw him. He just looked up at the sky and stood there a while. It wasn't the image of a prince, it was the image of a man who had experienced loss and was trying to hold on. Across the nation, prayers rose for him and his family. When the first light broke across the palace roof, it touched the walls with pale gold. The world was still talking, still waiting for clarity. But inside, William was simply breathing through another morning. The news had broken hearts across Britain, but none more than his own. Still, there was something unsaid in his posture, not surrender, but endurance. "He'll carry on," said an older courtier. "He always does, because he must." And as the day rose fully, the palace held within it a grief both royal and profoundly human. Public and media response as dawn broke over London. The palace's statement had already swept across every television, newspaper, and digital screen. News presenters spoke with softened tones, their voices carrying both shock and empathy. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, wrapped in coats and scarves, faces filled with disbelief. Cameras flashed as reporters tried to capture every face, every hint of sorrow. The gates turned into a wall of flowers, cards, and hands pressing against the bars as though reaching for comfort within. On social media, the reaction was instant and overwhelming. Hashtags linked millions in a shared wave of grief. Videos poured in from across the world, from New York to Sydney, with candles flickering in tribute and soft music playing beneath photos of the prince and his family. Some wrote about his strength, others about the unbearable pressure he carried. "He never asked for pity," one post read, "but he always showed grace." It was clear the world wasn't just mourning a headline, it was mourning a man they had come to know through years of watching his insurance. Television commentators, who often spoke with distance, now spoke with personal emotion. "You can hear it in their voices," a viewer remarked online. "They're not reading from a script anymore." Analysts discussed the possible political and family impact, but the tone remained deeply human. A well-known broadcaster paused mid-sentence during a live segment, her voice breaking. "He's been through too much loss for one lifetime," she said, lowering her eyes. The moment spread quickly across the internet, replayed over and again. In the streets of London, conversation shifted. His people spoke about the news. "He always looked so steady," said an elderly man at a bakery counter, "but you never really know what people are carrying." Taxi drivers turned up the radio as the news played, nodding slowly. "You've got to respect how he's handled things," said one driver. "Never snapped, never hid. That takes something strong." It wasn't royal status that people discuss now, it was character, the kind that shows in grief and dignity rather than power or privilege. Outside the palace gates, more tributes arrived by the hour. Messages written in every language fill the air with emotion. "You're not alone," one card read, "we're standing with you." Children placed hand-drawn pictures on the ground, some showing the prince beside his family under a bright sky. He looked tired on TV. A little boy told his mother, "I hope he sleeps tonight." Volunteers from the neighborhood brought tea and blankets to those waiting in the cold. "It's like the whole city stopped arguing for one day," said a man. At news headquarters, editors debated how to cover the story respectfully. For once, even the more aggressive tabloids held back. "We wanted to show care, not chaos," admitted one editor later. "It's not a scandal, it's a sorrow." The headlines were simple and direct, some just reading our hearts. With the prince, photographs of William with his children filled the front pages, often showing his hand resting gently on their shoulders. The images spoke more than words, a man trying to stay strong for those who needed him. Most royal commentators reminder audiences of the prince's journey from his boyhood marked by tragedy to his years as a father trying to create stability. "He's been shaped by grief," said one historian during a BBC panel, "but each time he's risen from it." The panelists spoke not with speculation, but with admiration. The story no longer belonged to rumor or politics, it belonged to compassion. "It's rare," said another guest, "to see a figure so public yet so human. That's why people are hurting." As night approached again, vigils formed across the United Kingdom. Outside Windsor Castle, hundreds held candles, their flickering light painting the faces of strangers who had come together in unity. "I didn't even plan to come," said a nurse, tears shining under the glow. "I just felt I should be here." A small choir began to sing softly, their voices trembling through the cool air. The song spread through the crowd, some joining, others simply listening. It wasn't rehearsed, it was something pure, born of shared sorrow. By midnight the nation seemed to breathe as one, a mixture of grief, pride, and compassion. Online posts turned from shock to solidarity. "He doesn't have to face it alone," one message read, "will keep him in our hearts." Newsrooms dimmed their lights, broadcasters ended their coverage with gentle music, and the streets slowly empty. Yet the emotion remained. People went home carrying it, unable to shake the image of the prince standing tall despite his heartbreak. And somewhere within those palace walls, as the world's lights dimmed, he must have known the depth of that care, millions of unseen faces holding him in their thoughts. The country had spoken not through speeches or politics, but through the simplest language. There is empathy. It was not the grandeur of a crown that united them that night, but the shared feeling of being human, the recognition that even the strongest hearts can break, and that even in that breaking they can bring people closer together than ever before. Prince William's recent struggles and pressure. The past year had tested Prince William in ways few could understand from the outside. He appeared composed, delivering speeches and attending state duties with these. But those who worked near him saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. Each day seemed to demand more of him, pulling him between duty and family. An assistant softly described how, "Oh, he worked through dinners and often stayed awake past midnight, reviewing schedules." The weight of expectation had turned his once effortless smile into something slower, almost forced. After the king's illness became public, the pressure around William multiplied. He suddenly found himself standing closer to the throne, carrying responsibilities that once belonged to his father. He barely breathed between meetings, a staffer noted, watching him stride past with his folder under one arm. Yet even as he handled the official load, there were personal storms gathering at home. Catherine's recovery had been difficult, and William refused to leave her side when she needed him most. He wants to be a husband first, said a friend, but the crown never waits. There were mornings when he looked out the palace window and saw crowds waving Union flags, and something in his expression seemed to show pride mixed with pressure. He had taken his mother's empathy and with it her burden of feeling too deeply. He takes everything to heart of former aid record. When people suffer he fee. Use it as if it were his own pain. That tenderness once his strength had started to drain him. At night he pacing through rooms whispering to himself as if searching for a balance that never came. Even the smallest actions began to show his fatigue. At a recent charity event cameras caught him rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to ease the pain he carried. He smiled through the speeches, but those close enough could see his fingers trembling slightly. He's pushing through, a photographer remarked, but you can tell he's not sleeping much. The long corridors of the palace became his track for thought, a place where he walked alone after everyone laughed, replaying the day and silence, trying to find strike eggs for William. The hardest moment came when duty clashed with family. His children often waited by the door when he left early. "Daddy, will you be home tonight?" little Charlotte once asked, tugging at his sleeve. He crouched down, kissed her forehead, and said, "I'll try my best." But many nights he didn't make it back before they were asleep. Those missed moments cut deeper than he ever admitted. He worries they'll grow up not knowing what normal feels like. A family friend said the crown demanded perfection, but his heart longed for the simple joys of life. In private meetings, aides noticed his patience thinning. He listened carefully, but often stared into space before and during, as if his mind or somewhere else entirely. "He's here, but not here," one advisor whispered to another during a briefing. The strain of public life had begun to shape, and he still joked occasionally, showing that familiar grin that reminded everyone of his mother, but it came like lightning, bright, brief, and gone before anyone could hold it. He's lost that lightness, an old friend admitted, but he hasn't lost his will. When Catherine's health reports improved slightly, he seemed to live again for the first time in months. They took a short walk through the gardens together, hand in hand, unnoticed by the press. He said it felt like the world had stopped spinning, a family friend recalled. But the pause didn't last long. The very next day, Parliament requested his attendance for a meeting concerning future royal transitions. He went, but those close to him said he looked miles away. "He's trying to serve two worlds," said a senior courtier, "the one he loves and the one he leads." At times his composure cracked in small human ways. Once, after a long briefing about public spending, he dropped his pen and sighed heavily. "It never ends," he muttered, unaware anyone heard. Another time, during a royal visit, a little boy asked him, "Do you miss your mom?" He smiled gently and said, "Every day." "Hey!" The crowd clapped softly, not realizing how raw other words were. That was the only real moment in the whole event, said a journalist who covered it. Everything else was duty. That line was love. He confided in very few people, often choosing silence over conversation. Even among his own team, he remained distant. "He doesn't talk about feelings," one member of staff said. "He just works harder. You check constantly for updates from Catherine or his father's aides." There were nights when he'd step out onto the balcony, staring at the city lights as if trying to draw strength from them. He said the silence makes him think of his mother, a friend revealed softly. It was in those rare moments of stillness that his royal mask slipped, revealing the weary man behind it. Despite it all, he never let his personal pain become public play. He smiled when needed and spoke with grace, though when cameras turned off, the exhaustion always returned. "He's holding the family together," said a cousin, "and that takes more strength than people know." Some nights he'd call old friends just to talk about ordinary things, football, childhood memories, anything but royal duties. He said he misses being just William. One of them recalled he said sometimes he forgets what that even feels like. He still visits hospitals, still bends to speak with children, still nods through endless meetings, but the light behind his eyes flickers constantly. He doesn't complain, said a senior aide, but you can feel the weight when he walks into a room. For a man raised to rule, he remains very much human, devoted, loyal, and burdened by love and duty intertwined. And so as night falls again over London, he exiles, rubs his eyes and murmurs, tomorrow will be better. Whether he believes it or not, no one knows, but he says it anyway because he must. Ocean or reactions from inside the palace. The night the statement went public, the mood inside Kensington Palace changed in an instant. Before then, everyone had been moving slow, eyes fixed on their tasks but minds elsewhere. As soon as the message appeared on every screen across Britain, silence fell like a curtain. No one quite knew what to say. It's out now, whispered a clerk near the communications office, glancing toward the corridor where the prince's private study was located. For the first time in days, the truth was no longer trapped behind palace, was upstairs. Aides stood by their phones watching messages flood in from officials, friends, and international figures. The phones wouldn't stop causing. One assistant said, rubbing his eyes, it just felt like the world had leaned in on us. Downstairs, the security staff gathered near the monitors, staring at news anchors, reading the very lines they had seen typed hours earlier. Even those trained to show no emotion struggled that night. He's our boss, but he's also just a man we respect, said a guard quietly. Seeing him go through this hurts. After the statement went live, William had retreated to his office and stayed there for a long time, speaking only once. He asked for a few minutes, said his private secretary, and everyone stepped back. When he finally emerged, his face was pale but steady, his voice calm yet filled with raw emotions. He said, thank you for standing by me, recalled an aide. The small group nodded, no one daring to reply. He then turned away, heading toward the window, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. That night Catherine stayed mostly in our private rooms, yet her presence was felt throughout the palace. She kept checking on everyone, said a maid who brought her tea. She asked if we were managing, if the staff were eating, if anyone needed rest. It was a small gesture, but it reminded everyone that compassion still flowed within those walls. She's his strength, the senior aide said. He draws everything from her. The two were seen later walking through the corridor, heads close, speaking softly. We'll get through this together, Catherine told him. Meanwhile, in the royal press office, reporters from around the world kept calling, demanding for comments. The staff worked in hushed tones, printing out statements and fielding requests. We had to say no to almost everyone. One officer recalled the palace was grieving, not performing for those inside. It wasn't just another media storm. It was a night when the weight of their loyalty met the fragility of their hearts. He doesn't see us as his workers, said another aide. He sees us as part of the circle. That's why we feel it so deeply. The same time, members of the royal household across other estates reached out. Messages came from Windsor, Sandringham, and Balmoral, each offering comfort in their own way. Some sent brief notes, others simply wrote, "We're with you." It's really encouraging, said a senior clerk who helped organize the replies. Late into the night, she watched as William personally signed short thank you messages. He said he didn't want anyone to think he was ignoring them. She recalled, even in grief be thought of duty. By midnight, the palace lights dimmed. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only a few guards and late-night aides. The palace felt emptier than usual. Footsteps echoed, doors clicked shut, and somewhere deep within a piano could be faintly heard just a few light notes from someone trying to ease the tension. I heard it too, said a steward. It was gentle, almost sad. It sounded like someone saying goodbye. Outside, the city lights reflected off the palace windows while the flags swayed in the wind. Those